It seems to be as far away from me as possible.
I'll sit right in front. Let me know if I'm too close.
Uh,
Of course, is my chomping away gonna bother you?
oh, no,
Maybe
no,
I
no,
should
no,
sit
no,
there.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no, no.
I just gotta go fill my water and I'm gonna be right back. I wanted to make sure I could drink while I eat.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful.
Thank you, Jody. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Always a time.
Yeah. So I'm hoping my for some reason the aspect ratio on my laptop is goofy. So
Oh, okay.
hopefully it's not too
So
bad.
you don't need
on
it
this
on
one.
that then, or
No, I
oh,
do.
You're still gonna,
I
okay.
do, but
Okay.
I was just looking at it, and part of the presentation's cut off right here. So
Oh,
I'm hoping that it's
it's not anything in here.
yeah, it's not settings. It's on my computer. So
Oh.
I just got a
Do
Mac.
you want a different? You
No,
want
I
a different laptop?
No, I think we can make it work. I
Okay.
just it is just an oddity of
A Mac and that,
Mac. Yeah,
or okay.
this Mac tech. So what I do is, nope, it's the same thing. So, okay, it's the maybe I'll pull out the
I'm
stuff
gonna
out
stick a
with
little
the-
tape on here just so it doesn't
Okay.
like whack in.
Oh, yeah. Great.
How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
This is what we'll just operate with it.
Ooh, I'm here 9 minutes early.
That's unlike me. Like I must be congruent. I have a friend who works for Hennepin County, and he always wants to kind of connect. And every time he wants to connect, I'm doing a training or I'm teaching a class, and I imagine that he probably thinks I'm trying to dodge him, but I'm always training or teaching a class. So it's kind of funny to see his email or his text message.
Nice. Okay. Do you want to just tell the people that you're coming?
Wait, which one? Yeah, that, yes. Oh, cool.
What is it?
Yeah. Shut up. You know what I'm talking about. I know. Okay. Yeah, so they do like.
No. Maybe they'll take it.
No, no, it's not. So it
Right.
Just for you.
I didn't know that was in here.
Oh,
yeah.
I did shower after today.
I just don't want to sit so close, like just. I know. Do you want me to, I'll come sit by you.
Super happy.
It might help me if I could have a sheet of paper.
So who are we missing?
Jessica's almost done with lunch.
Oh, and Ashley, right? And then is that everyone? Oh, Suzette.
Thank you.
She's in there. Should be out.
Hello. Yes.
She signed out in court.
What are you doing? There you go.
Just in case.
Good idea. So we're just waiting for 3 people.
All right.
And then we can start.
Yeah, oh, I. First time I moved. Yeah, I really want a lot of attention. People right here.
Maryland.
All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started, everyone. We're just missing like 1 or 2 people, but I don't know where they are, so we're gonna go ahead and get started, so that we can end on time, because I know some people have some places to go. So, thanks everyone for coming. Want to introduce Andre Cohen. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
great. Who's with Center, so the powers, the stress is on here because it's after lunch. And he does a lot of face-to-face and online courses on diversity education, including leadership development, empowerment training, cross-cultural competence, sensitivity training, anti-racism training, and team building. I want to just remind you, we try to do at least 2 trainings a year on diversity issues, cultural competence, on a number of things. Our second training for this year will be on transgender issues later on in May. So kind of an important piece of our work. Heard a lot about Andre and knew he was also teaching a seminar for the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, and thought, well, maybe he could just come here, and that would be even better.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll let you take it away. I can see people are fanning themselves. Is it like really hot in here?
Oh, it's gonna be to me, like, we go by.
Okay, I think we could leave the door open. I know last night during the legislative meeting, it got really hot in here, so I think we need to leave the door open, but take it away.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to say it's an honor to be in front of you. I am humbled by the words that other people say about me, and so please hold those things suspect until you judge for yourself. And it's really interesting to me how I've come to even do some of the things that I do around speaking and helping people to learn more about each other. So my parents married in college. They were sophomores, high school sweethearts, and as was at least the custom in our family, all of my aunts married their high school sweethearts. And I think there were some other things in play as well, because my parents were married in June and I was born in October. So there may have been some other things in play. So, but as such, they as many of us know, going through your college matriculation requires a lot of time and effort and not a lot of finances. So I grew up in a state of poverty, but not the state of poverty. My parents did the best they could with what they had, and I found that it was inadequate, as hopefully you will find that your parents' work with you was also inadequate. And so I went to Head Start. So I was a Head Start child, one of the earliest renditions of that program in Dayton, Ohio. I mentioned just a minute ago that we were in a state of poverty, but not the state. And so although we did not have a lot of finances, we were never poor. And my mother made sure that all of our clothes from the Goodwill were washed and ironed and pressed. And when she had the time, she would make clothing for us so that we had the best and brightest. I was a child with a speech impediment. They had a practice, particularly in the 70s. I don't know if they still do it now, but when my mother told me, I was confused by what she meant. She said my tongue was clipped. And so I thought that I had Gene Simmons from Kiss. I thought I had one of those tongues and I just cut it off. But actually it was just that muscle, that flap of skin, they cut it so that I could, what is it called?
Frenulum.
One more time.
Frenulum.
Frenulum. The frenulum. So I can articulate my words now. And so that combination of all of those things did not add up to someone who should be standing before you now. And so I am always humbled. And I'm also humbled by the fact that my grandfather made sacrifices so that I could be here. And I try to honor his sacrifices every day of my life. My grandfather was a very proud man. His name was, because they could not find a good name for him, they called him J.W. That was his name. And later they changed his name to John Wesley. And most folks would understand why African Americans would have some adoration for John Wesley being a great abolitionist. And so my grandfather was proud. And his name was John Wesley, which I don't find very difficult to say. And so his name was John. And any combination of John would more than likely be acceptable. However, growing up in Tennessee and in the South, saying John was a bit more exotic than what people were used to. So my grandfather oftentimes was called George. Or Boy. Or any other name that wasn't given to him by his parents. And so his retaliation was very militant, which was that he said nothing. He kept his head down. He did his job. He let them do all those things. And so through his militant action, my father was born, and therefore I was allowed to be born. And so I speak in ways that my grandfather never could, because I can, and he couldn't. And so when we think about this idea of, cultural competence, and I'll go through some models that we've used in kind of our psychosocial arenas, that some of which have benefited us, others not so much. And I want to point out why some of those things may not have been as effective, and how we can create effectiveness in whatever model we're using. Because I think sometimes we miss the central point that I hope to bring out today in our presentation. So before I go any further, what I'd like to do is, so I have a stack of handouts that I'd like to hand out to you. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm prepared to deliver. But more importantly than what I have to say, I'm curious about what you came to learn. What did you want to talk about? Given the nature of our world, given the nature of our work, what were some of the things you were hoping we might talk about in this particular session? And I'm going to write some of those down in my journal. What were some of the things you were hoping we might talk about?
Making connections.
Making connections with
Families.
Okay. Okay.
Building trust
Building trust with whom?
with families, our clients, people we serve.
Okay.
Uncovering bias.
Okay.
I'd say checking ourselves.
You mean like up against the glass?
I mean, like being willing to really examine our own biases and admit mistakes and admit to different privileges and things that we may or may not do that all the time.
Okay.
Making people feel safe.
Which people, say from who to what?
African Americans, if we're not ourselves African American. People that we're helping.
Yes. Yes.
You have a way of how you present to other cultures. Be mindful of the fact that we do things now, but we
Right over here, I saw
So if anyone's in need of, oh, yes, ma'am. You're very welcome, very welcome. Anyone else need a pen or? Okay, yeah, here, I have some right here.
Right over here.
Thanks so much. Anyone else?
Great. So the information, so what I'd like for you to do is put one thing that you value or that is important to you in each one of those circles. One thing that is of importance to you or value to you, each one of a person like a significant other or a grandchild. It could be a place like Belize or Bemidji. It could be a concept like freedom or justice. It could be a thing like a motorcycle or a home. So one thing that you value or that's important to you in each one of those circles. One thing that you value or is important to you. All right, it looks like most people have 4, if not all 5. So we'll go to phase 2 of the game. What I'd like to do is I'd like for you to find 2 people for each one of the things that you wrote down that you value or that is important to you. I want you to find 2 people who either agree with that and say, that's a really good idea. I think that's a great idea. Or they share something that is similar to what you have on your paper. All right? And once you have found those 2 individuals for each one, which means you'll have a minimum of how many people? 10. 2 for each one. So you have 5 things, 2 for each one, a minimum of 10 people or 10 signatures on your paper. What I'd like for them to do is, if they have something that you share or that they think is a good idea, to put their signature next to that. All right? So you have a minimum of 10 people, 2 signatures for each one. You can have multiple signatures. Multiple people sign multiple times, right? Or a single person sign multiple times. You have a total of 90 seconds to do that, starting now.
That's not how you're supposed to do it, though. You can't.
Oh, do we have to
We don't learn everything about each other that way.
I am learning. I learned
Done
the
couldn't
integrity.
tell
Oh, I got distracted and just like you too. I think I heard somebody else say that too.
You already have 2. Well, what if I want more than 2?
It's not the rules of the game.
A minimum of 10.
See, I can have as many as I want.
You're right. Here, you want to say mine?
I most certainly do. Well,
You can tell how my brain works.
Oh, no.
I can't even. Oh, wait, I do. They don't have to. They don't have to match mine.
No, right.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
see, I thought we had to match them.
60 seconds. 60
Okay.
seconds.
Yeah, this one's from Joey.
Sure.
So many people have integrity.
Me too. So, would you like me to check out Brian's eye review?
Oh, I should have went that way.
But now we'll.
There you go.
That's fine.
Uh-oh, I have 2 empty circles still.
I'll take Brian back to him.
I have 2 empty circles.
All right, anybody, integrity, security, trust?
45 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
What have you guys?
This one's mine.
I got you.
Okay.
I still have to.
Family was mine.
Security.
Anyone
I
else
got
have
security.
Anyone else have
Hello.
creating change? Creating family integrity.
Yeah.
Oh, integrity.
Yes.
And family. All right.
15 seconds.
Anyone else have creating change?
I think I got mine all.
Creating change? Creating change? Do creating
4, 3, 2, 1. Game over. Someone said I failed. So if you could just count the number of signatures that you have on your paper. And so if you have a number, just you want to shout that out. 9, 12, 11, 15. Oh, 17. Anyone have more than 17?
Like 17.
Or either 17 signatures. Anyone got more than 17? Well, congratulations. What is your name?
Morgan.
Morgan. Let's give Morgan a hand for getting 17 signatures. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So as you were to accept Morgan's award. So as you were around the room, what are the things that you saw on other people's papers that you were like, man, why didn't I think of that? I should have wrote that down on my paper. Did folks see any of those things? And what were those?
Servant stewardship.
Servant and stewardship.
Empathy.
Empathy.
peace.
Peace. So you saw peace on someone.
Sleep was on there too.
I don't know much about that. Yeah. So it was obvious that people saw things that they were like, oh, yeah. Were there things as you were going around the room that were either more difficult to find someone to sign on, or you actually didn't find anyone to sign on one of those things? And what was one of those? Yes?
Nobody signed communication.
No one signed communication. So if communication is important to you, even though you didn't write it on your paper, if that's important to you, please raise your hand. Communication, right?
Probably just so obvious.
Yeah, well, maybe. Something else that you saw on, or you didn't get someone to sign on, or it was difficult. Yes. Adventure. So please raise your hand if you like adventure, even if you watch someone else do it. Adventure, right? All right, great. One more that was difficult. Friends. Please raise your hand if you value friends, even if it wasn't written on your paper. All right, great. So what's the point? What's the object lesson of this particular activity? And why would I start out this session talking about diversity and cultural competence and all this stuff? Why would I start out with an activity like this?
Show that we actually have a lot of shared values.
To show that we have a lot of shared values.
I was going to say show our connections.
To show our connections.
Common ground.
The common ground, right? I don't know, how many other trainings that you've been to, and anyone been to another cultural competence, sensitivity, diversity training? Okay, you are the people I have to fix. Because a lot of times the premises of those trainings really create the opposite of what they're designed to create. I know that there's a program in the metropolitan area called Courageous Conversations, and it's interesting that I've noticed that once people have gone through those, they're less likely to have a conversation because they went through the creative. I don't know. It's just interesting. It's an interesting observation to me, and so I want to talk about why that is. And I think part of it is because we spend a lot of time talking about our differences, and we don't balance that with talking about our commonalities. Because I find it interesting that I would imagine that most of your parents did not know each other. Is that a safe assumption? That most of your parents did not know the other parents in this room? Is that a relatively safe? Yeah, right? So how is it possible that I ask the things that you value, the things that you are that are important to you, how is it possible to even find those connections with other individuals?
Share a mission.
So we share a mission, being here at the organization, right? What else?
Many things are common. They're common to man, woman, whatever. They're common. We want the same things a lot of people.
Okay, so a lot of us want the same things.
Human nature.
Human nature, because we're human, right? And I think sometimes our humanity gets lost when we're trying to figure out how to be so sophisticated in how we talk to each other, about each other, with each other, relationships with each other, when if we can back up just a step and understand the simplicity of recognizing our human commonalities, that actually opens up and flowers the complexity of our individuality. And so we'll talk about how do you hold those two things simultaneously. We'll talk about this idea of cultural humility. This is a hint for my next question. What is the most valuable non-renewable resource on the planet? The human soul. Marketing executives they spend lots of time trying to analyze how to capture the human soul. They spend tons of money on logos to understand how to get the human soul. So the soul is a pretty dynamic thing. And the way that so when I taught middle school and in high school, I had to break down these sophisticated things in some very simple ways. And so I used my grandmother's passing as my object lesson, how I learned about what the human soul looks like and how it's made up. And so the human soul is, for our purposes, we'll say that it is the body and it is the spirit. And the spirit just being that animating force, right? So once that animating force is gone, whatever you believe after that's on you. But for right now, we'll just talk about this animating force, right? And so when my grandmother passed, we have some really interesting customs where I come from. And one of them was that we buy an expensive box to put our dead loved ones in. And so this particular box has a pearl inlay, and if you look at it in different ways, you can see, rows of colors, or a prism, if you will. And in each of the corners have these like gold eagle claws on the corner. And part of the practice is that we would lay the dead loved one in the box for everyone to come and look at. And so my grandmother's laying in her box. And they got the whole thing all wrong, because that outfit that they had her in isn't very flattering for her. That wasn't one of her best colors. And her makeup, she would never put that much rouge on her cheekbones, and that certainly was not her best wig. But they put my grandmother on display in the spots. And what would happen is that as she's on display, people would come up to give their final pay their final respects to my grandmother. And so my grandmother would be laying there, and people would come and they would say things to my grandmother. Some people would, stick a note in there to my grandmother. And then you have that one creepy family member who wants to touch the dead body. And you're like, get away from there, leave grandma alone, right? Now, they're interacting with my grandmother, but where is their interaction falling short? She's not, she can't answer back. So the house is on the market, but there's nobody living there, right? So my grandmother's spirit is gone. Now, we also had this other custom. This is the second part of the custom, where we would go to my grandmother's house for what we would call the repast dinner. And so people would bring spaghetti, and random people would bring random spaghetti. And I just want you to know, you should not eat everybody's spaghetti. Just putting that out there. But at any rate, so people are having spaghetti and looking through my grandmother's photo album, and telling stories about my grandmother, telling lies about my grandmother, and it feels as if my grandmother is there. But she's not, because her spirit can't animate anything. And so when we talk about this idea of the human soul, we have to recognize that this is what we're trying to protect. We're trying to protect this. This is the core of humanity right here, the human soul. I remember as a young man, there was and it's funny that they called it this. There was a mini-series on television, and I guess in retrospect, I would be nervous to see what a maxi series would be, because this mini-series lasted for 2 weeks, 3 hours a night on primetime television, and it was called Alex Haley's. It was based off that book. Anybody remember that? Okay. Oh, so there are some people that are my age in here. Okay, good. Right. So I remember the opening scene of Roots, right? And my parents thought it was profound enough for us to see it, but they didn't want us to watch it, because my parents would say really strange stuff like cover your eyes at certain parts, right? And so we would cover our eyes like this. Still see, but it made my parents feel good, right? So the opening scene, LeVar Burton has been captured from West Africa, and they have LeVar. You know LeVar Burton, Reading Rainbow, right? I can fly twice high. Take a look. It's in a book, the Reading Rainbow. Okay. So they have LeVar Burton up in the thing, and they're going to condition him for this economic system that they're going to put him in. So they're ready to condition him. So they have him in these things, these chains, these shackles, and the conditioner comes, and he has this just grotesquely monstrous thing that he's going to use to help condition LeVar Burton. And so he hits LeVar Burton while he's in the thing, and LeVar goes, ah! And the guy says, "What is your name?" And LeVar Burton says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the man, "No, your name is Toby." So LeVar Burton goes, ah! And so the man draws back, and he hits him again. Ah! And he says, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Kunta Kinte." And the man says, "No, your name is Toby." And so this continues on until the last strike. Now the man is tired. LeVar Burton is holding on by a thread. The man draws enough strength to prepare for one more. And he says, he asked this question, "What is your name?" And LeVar Burton says, "My name is Toby." What happened? Broke his spirit. Broke his soul. And when that break happens, people move from becoming human beings and they turn into things. My grandmother was a thing. That wasn't my grandmother. That was a thing in that box. Because my grandmother could make cookies. She would put peas in her Jello mold. I don't know why she did it, but that was her little special. They put, you know, people who grew up in the Depression, they did a lot of things that were different. Cut mold off cheese, you know, serving, you know, take the mold out the jelly. They serve everything, right? That was my grandmother. That thing in the box, that wasn't my grandmother. And what do we do to things when human beings we turned into things? How's your screwdriver doing that? Is it well protected and laid out nicely like the good silverware? No, why? Because it is a thing. And too often our system has turned people into things. And that's something that I call an obstacle illusion. We succumb to these obstacle illusions. And I'll show you how that happens. So you wrote down 5 things that you value or that are important to you. And I have some questions. I have a hypothesis that I'd like for you to help me with. And my hypothesis simply can be answered by these 3 questions. So if you can just raise your hand if it's appropriate enough for you to do so. So as you look at those 5 things that you wrote, what of those 5 things have specifically that might show up on an HR form, human resources job application form, in connection with your racial or ethnic identity? Out of those 5 things that you wrote down, is there anything there that would show up on a form that would indicate your racial or ethnic identity? Okay, so I have 1 person. All right, cool. Second question. Please raise your hand if there is something specifically that has to do with your gender or gender identity as one of those 5 things that you value, specifically dealing with your gender or gender identity. Okay, so I have 2 people. Great. Lastly, is there anything that would show up on an Internal Revenue Service audit that has to do with your social economic status? I got 2 people. Why do you think that most of us, when we wrote down 5 things that we value, why did our race or ethnicity not show up as one of those things? Well, why did our gender identity or gender expression not show up as one of those things? And for most of us, why did our social economic status not show up for us? Yes?
Because they're not the things that are at the forefront. I think when you think about the things that mean most to us.
So they're not the things that are in the forefront. They're not the things that mean the most to you. Other folks.
They're more universal concepts.
They're more universal concepts. The things you wrote down are more universal concepts. What else?
Just take it for granted.
You just take it for granted. Yeah. I would suggest that those things didn't show up because you're smart. Because you're smart. You did exactly what I asked you to do. And what did I ask you to do? Write down 5 things that are important to you. And do you value more than 5 things? Yes, you do. Right? Did you put those in chronological? Did you put those in a particular order, or did you do them randomly? I don't know. So, but I would imagine that you value more than those 5 things. And I would imagine that those things that I mentioned might show up on that list, but just not as high as the things that we just talked about. And the thing that I think is interesting is that those other descriptors are trying to turn you into a thing. I am in this category. I am in this box. I can be organized in this kind of way. And I would say that that is a dampering to the expression of the human soul. It's one of those things that holds us back. President Barack Hussein Obama, how does he show up ethnically? What would most people say that he is? Black. That's what most people would say. Is that the sum total of his existence? No, his life is much more complicated than that. His father's a black man from Kenya. His mother's a white woman from Kansas. They got together and they Obama'd. And so as much as he is a black man, he is also a biracial or multiracial man. And as much as he is a black man and a multiracial or biracial man, he is also a white man. Can you imagine President Barack Hussein Obama walking around saying, I am a white man? It was hard enough for some people to believe that he was born, but that's a whole nother conversation, right? And so the protection of the human soul is paramount, because when we don't, there are tons of pitfalls that we fall into. This void starts to form when we don't protect the human soul. And what I would suggest is that this assault on the soul comes in forms like racism, heterosexism, sexism, religious bias or phobias. All of those things are assaults on the human soul, but there's a little void. There's a monster that's waiting for this void to open up. And guess what the monster is called? Free market capitalism. Anyone ever seen a commercial that actually made you feel better about being a human being? Most of them demonstrate how inadequate we are. Although I did see I saw a Tundra commercial. Did anybody see that commercial? And there are giants, and the truck is called a Titan. So and they thanked Ford and Chevrolet and all these other things, it's like, oh wow, I need one of those, right? But the whole idea of that marketing scheme is to show you how inadequate you are unless what? You buy their product, right? Except for herpes commercials. Herpes commercials, they're always happy. They're living life, I have herpes, but right. But free market capitalism or consumerism is waiting to sell you stuff, and so they're trying to constantly talk about how inadequate we are. But what do we know about the accumulation of stuff to fill that void? Doesn't work. And we have to battle this with our clients all the time because the world keeps telling them, do this and it'll fill your void, or at least it'll numb it enough to squeak by. We're battling this, trying to protect this all the time with our clients. This idea that you can buy stuff to fill your void, we know doesn't work because our avatars have told us. They've shown us that this doesn't work. Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Michael Jackson, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Robin Williams. These are people who had all the success and fame and money you're supposed to have, but it didn't fill the void. So what fills the void? How do we bring it back together? Well, we have to help people to protect these two entities and not let the outside influences crack them in such a way that they can't find their way back. And so, another thing that's helpful is this idea of spiritual practices, and whether it's a religious practice or whether it is a community building practice. When we engage in increasing our power, it takes us outside of ourselves. And so when we talk about this idea of the animating force, I don't want people to get caught up in whatever confines that they come from, but really think about that in terms of how do I outwardly engage with folks to create an atmosphere. So we'll keep going. So here's some schools of thought, and I apologize for some reason the thing is cut off, but I'll make the PowerPoint available for you to see it in its entirety. But there are schools of thought around this idea of cultural competence and diversity and that kind of stuff. There's the idea of knowledge and abilities versus sensitivity training, right? That people just need to be more sensitive. There's the idea of white privilege, which is counterbalanced with people of color's internalized oppression. There's cultural competence and cultural destructiveness. There's monocultural mindsets and intercultural mindsets. And so there are all of these different kinds of models that many of us have been exposed to, that we've been using. But I want to back up just a bit, because all of this can be dizzying when you're trying to figure out how to deal directly with a client. Which model do I use when I'm dealing directly with a client or a coworker? And what I would suggest is that we need to focus less on the models and look at diversity elegance. So I have an 18-month-old daughter, and I thought I was smart because I had this thing called an iPad. And so, you know, I'd get in my iPad and I zoom through and I do all the stuff I want to do on my iPad. And then I left it laying out, and my 18-month-old daughter came and she picked it up